This is Jennifer Sias. In the spring of 1992, I met an extraordinary woman and teacher, Mrs. Theo Tippett. I was matched with Theo for my student teaching experience at Beverly Hills Middle School in Huntington, West Virginia. The first day I met her, I was terrified. The second day I met with her, I was still terrified. And I suppose I still remain a little terrified of her today. Seriously, terror soon gave way to awe, respect, and admiration. Clearly, Mrs. Tippett had high expectations of her students and of her student teachers. Theo might come across as a little stern and domineering, but I soon learned that she was modeling how to create an orderly classroom where students can focus, think, read, write, and learn. The classroom in many ways was Theo's stage. As a teacher, she was dramatic and captivating. She held her students to high standards, but she also held them, their attention, in the palm of her hand. I'll never forget watching her turn students on to grammar in enchanting ways, or listening to her read passages from books to spellbound kids. Her students wanted to please her, and so did this student teacher. Really though, she just had a way of motivating those she taught to accomplish more than they thought they could. Theo became more than simply my middle school supervising teacher. She became a mentor. I successfully passed my middle school student teaching experience and stayed in touch on and off with Theo over the years. Nearly 4 years ago, though, our paths intersected in a powerful way when she was diagnosed with cancer. The positive part of this experience, for me at least, has been the opportunity to get to know Theo and her family in a way I never had. My admiration for her has just grown as I now consider her not only the epitome of a successful teacher, but also the epitome of strength, character, and love in her battle with cancer. This woman is still teaching me. Just listen to her story.
Well, I remember when I was in 6th grade, I wrote a paper on what you want to be when you grow up, and at that time I wrote that I wanted to be a missionary. Well, of course that changed, and when I graduated from high school in 1967, women didn't have as many options as they have today. We could be secretaries, we could be nurses, we could be teachers, we could be hairdressers. Well, I didn't want to be any of those, but I wanted to go to college. And so I went to Marshall University and started out in the College of Arts and Sciences without a clue as to what I wanted to do in my life. But as the years progressed, I realized that, well, I better do something where I can, number one, get a job and make money. And so I transferred to Teachers College and graduated with a degree, a double major in speech and English, and became a speech teacher at Huntington East High School, where I taught for 4 years, and then later transferred to Beverly Hills Junior High School, where I was an English teacher. And then I retired for about 10 years because my husband and I had a son, Tommy, and then I went back to teaching after, I think he was about 10 years old, and I substituted just at Beverly Hills and Huntington East. And I was called every single day to substitute. And I enjoyed substituting. And at that time, the principal at Beverly Hills said, "I have an English opening, will you come back?" And I agreed, and the rest is history. Well, I always wanted to be important. I've always been a bit of a show-off. I've never been shy. In 6th grade, I was voted most popular and most friendly. And I think that has even carried over to today because having been ill these past nearly 4 years, every day I still receive 3 or more cards from people, and I'm going into my 4th year of illness. And so that must have carried over into into my adulthood. But as a child, I didn't really think about my future. I lived every day and enjoyed every day that came along, and I don't remember anything except wanting to have a good time. That was very important. I made good grades. Education came easily to me. I was an ace speller. I hated math, but I enjoyed most all my subjects. I loved my teachers. I remember every teacher I ever had, but I never wanted to be a teacher. Never was that in my...
Why, do you think?
I have no idea, but I did not want to be a teacher. But as it turned out, I think I was a fairly successful teacher in my career. I might say in this interview that the interviewer was one of my student teachers, and she was a dandy student teacher. In fact, she was so good as a student teacher that I nominated her as Student Teacher of the Year, which she won. And I hope that was partly because of my mentorship and how I guided her through teaching. And good teachers always make teaching look easy, and it is not an easy profession, as many beginning teachers find out. They think, oh, this teaching is so easy, because good teachers make it look easy, but it's not. It's very, very difficult. You do not have a work ethic, you will not be successful in your job. You will be fired from your job. I think you should be fired from your job if you're not willing to put forth the effort to do your very, very best. And too many times today we're seeing people who are not willing to do their best. All they want is the paycheck. Well, I liked an orderly, structured classroom, as you well know. And my work ethic, I required students to do certain things, and I think the higher you raise the bar, the more you'll get from your student. And as a teacher, my expectations were high for my students in the classroom as 7th graders, and then I later moved to 8th grade, and for my student teachers. I failed student teachers, and that was not a very popular thing to do during the 90s, to fail student teachers by the time they'd reached student teaching time. But if they couldn't do what I felt they should be able to do, then they didn't need to be a teacher. And I think I failed 2, possibly 3 student teachers.
Didn't you, in fact, decide at one point you didn't want any more student teachers, and so you had to be talked into taking me?
I had so many student teachers in a row that were so unprepared that I said I never want another student teacher again. And no, it was you were good, and then I had a string of really poor ones, and then I said no more. And then they talked me into another student teacher who turned out to be, in fact, it was Amy McElroy, who is now a very successful teacher at Huntington High. In fact, I nominated her as Student Teacher of the Year, and she too won the award. So, oh, reading is absolutely essential. I have been a reader since I learned to read. And I remember learning to read in 1st grade. We read about Dick and Sally and Puff and Spot. And I loved it from the beginning. My great-grandmother who lived with us, I mean, every single day I remember sitting in her lap and her reading to me. And I still have my books. My mother just brought a stack of books that were mine as a little girl. So I remember reading from probably Isabella's age, who incidentally loves her books. I mean, loves her books. Reading is reading will help you be a better student. As an English teacher and really a writing teacher, I always encouraged reading to my students. And children who proclaim to be non-readers, I knew I could hook them in a book because I read millions of middle school age level books, and I would tell them these stories, and they'd say, well, tell me more, Mrs. Tippett, tell me more. I'd go, no, you have to read this book and you will love it. And they always did. They always ended up, it may have been the only book they ever read, but at least they read that one book. Reading is essential to success. And you will be a better student if you can read. If you can't read, how can you do a math problem, a reading math problem? How can you figure out science or learn history? If you can't read, you can't do anything.
Weren't you instrumental in developing a reading program at the middle school? Tell me about that.
I don't know how it all began really, but I just felt like reading was so important. And there was a movement at that time that students at middle-age levels should read. And in order to be a reader, you have to read. And so at that time, my principal, David Roach, also believed in reading. And we were grassroots at our middle school. And he created a time in the day where the whole school would read every day. And in order to hook kids on books, you have to share what you read. I mean, if you just go into the library and pick out a book and look at the pages, that doesn't work. But if you literally get a child hooked into something interesting, they will enjoy that book. And then we'd always have them write responses. And by that I mean writing a little response, how they felt about the book, how, if they were the author, they could change the ending, or what they liked about the book. But we'd have children orally share and share in writing. But we did develop a reading program in our school. I think it was maybe 30 minutes every day. The whole school read. The teachers, every teacher was a reading teacher. As you know, I got to speak with Jeanette Walls because of you. And when I first read the book, I thought, oh my goodness, this happened in Welch, West Virginia. How could she have gotten on a bus and gone to New York in the, what was it, the 1980s or 1990s? What balls she had. I mean, to do that as a young woman was so impressive. It was one impressive book. She had a hard life, but yet, here again, it shows that hard work, manners, doing your very best pays off in the end. Classic example. Number one, are you happy? And number two, are you doing the best job you can do? And if you're doing the best job of all and working hard at doing that, and you're happy at what you're doing, then I think you're successful. Money does not define success. And I think too many young people today define success by how much money you make or what kind of car you drive, and that's not success. Success is doing your best and being happy at what you're doing. One important lesson in life I learned because of cancer is do the things that you always wanted to do. Don't say, oh, I'll put that off and do it later, because later may never come. I mean, Tom and I planned on retiring and traveling, and we did a lot of traveling before I became ill. However, we planned on spending our winters in Key West, and we've been unable to do that these past winters since we've both retired. And I say, do it, don't wait. If you want to go to London, go to London. If you want to go to the Ukraine, go to the Ukraine. Don't wait. Save your money and do the things that you want to do. But always save. It's important to save for your retirement. It's important. And Tom and I were savers. I mean, we saved, and that's why we live a comfortable life, and both can be retired. I'm 61 and he's 63. He retired at 62. So because we were savers, we were both able to retire. Learn good manners. That's so important. And so many people today don't know good manners. And it's important to have good manners. It's important to always tell the truth. It's important to always do your very best. I hope this is beneficial to your students. And students, just listen to your teacher. Do your best work. Try your hardest. Don't slough. Don't be lazy. And read. I want just to tell your students to always write thank you notes. Always. They're very, very important.